This is Marketing Uncomplicated. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I'm joined by Pete Duche, founder and principal consultant of Fusion Leadership Consulting. Pete brings over 25 years of leadership experience, including service in law enforcement, where he commanded a major city's crisis negotiator team, and we'll dive into that. In that role, Pete oversaw high-stake calls that required calm under pressure, clear decision-making, and deep trust in people, all qualities that translate directly into leadership today. Pete also holds a dual graduate degree, a master's of public administrations with Villanova University and a master's in industrial organizational psychology from Harvard University. The blend of real-world frontline leadership and academically grounded insight is what makes Fusion's approach so unique. At Fusion, Pete and his team don't just deliver theory, they co-create practical, tailored solutions that empower leaders, strengthen workplace culture, and guide organizations through complexity and change. Welcome to the show, Pete. It's really good to have you.
Thank you for having me. That was a really nice introduction. I like that.
I apologize for the background noise of my puppies wrestling a little bit, but let's go a little bit back. And this is what I always like to do with a lot of my guests in terms of your origin and story and your credibility. But you had such a fascinating journey, and I love the journey that you had leading up to building into organizational psychology with 25 years and commanding crisis negotiator teams. You and I have had these conversations offline, but for the audience today, let's dive a little bit deep in terms of what you did in your past and how that translates and shapes your philosophy on leadership today.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking. It's it's hard to reflect back on 25 years of mistakes.
Mistakes, you said?
I've made plenty of them. Made plenty of mistakes. Absolutely. Yeah. But we talked a little bit about leadership, and I think part of leadership is acknowledging mistakes that you've made. But so I joined the police department in Nashville, Tennessee, back in January of 2000. Went through the academy, learned some interesting leadership lessons there, part of what to do and part of what not to do. But after that, I spent a little bit of time in patrol. Then I joined what was called a flex team, where it was a gun and drug unit. Basically, it was a uniformed gun and drug unit, but the focus was high crime areas. After a couple of years of doing that, I worked undercover in a Vice unit, and in this case, Vice investigated everything from narcotics, human trafficking, gambling, and prostitution. And I had the coolest chin ponytail that anybody could ever see or imagine when I worked undercover at the time. And so I still miss my chin ponytail. Sometimes I play with maybe growing it out, but probably not. Excuse me. So after working undercover in Vice for a while, I was promoted to the rank of sergeant, and I did that for a short period. I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, and past that lieutenant point, there was a lot that went on in the career, but some of that was being the commander of the crisis negotiator teams, like you had talked about. So that oversaw everything that had to do with crisis negotiation, hostage negotiation, call-outs, any sort of personal crisis that somebody was experiencing. The negotiator teams would be hand in hand with that. Any sort of like SWAT call out, negotiators would accompany SWAT. Is if there's some sort of person inside of a building for some reason, even if it's just a suspect that didn't want to turn themselves in, the preferred response is negotiate that person out peacefully, as opposed to sending SWAT in with weapons, right? And I also was a captain over a few different divisions within that police department, to include something called the Family Intervention Program, where we had counselors and therapists that gave therapy and counseling sessions to victims of crime. I was also the captain over the Domestic Violence Division, and I was also an executive officer over what we call what Nashville calls the Investigative Services Bureau. So it involved hundreds of officers that were doing different types of investigations, everything from specialized investigations that included those drugs and narcotic type things that I talked about before, to domestic violence, to youth services programs, to special victims units, and the list kind of goes on from there. So that's a very short summary of 25 years.
No, I love that in the sense of And it's interesting that you say mistakes because I think a lot of the work that you were doing was extremely positive. But I like that you still call out in terms of the learning experience potentially over the curve of that 25 years into really being able to nail and knack down exactly how you manage these processes year over year. But what really was what sparked you to start Fusion? What was that time and place, whether it was still when you were in service or whether it was post service, and why? Why Fusion? Why organizational psychology?
Yeah. So why did I start all of that? It was a combination of experiences, both personal experiences and experiences from other people, as well as as I grew as a leader and as a consultant, I would go across the US working with different cities as well as companies, working with everything on promotional processes to things like business continuity plans. And as I met more people, I learned that there were a lot of people that were unhappy at work. Just, I mean, unhappy is sometimes putting it lightly, right? They were really great employees, but they were miserable there working for somebody that was making their life harder than it needed to be. So, and I experienced a little bit of that, not so much personally. I had a lot of great relationships where I worked, but a close friend of mine, when their uh, when their spouse's father passed away, for example, their bosses told them, "Well, this comes at a really bad time for us at work," and they didn't have like some sort of like an essential job role. It was just your average job. There was no like life threatening. No lives were impacted by this person missing work. It's just that their boss wanted them to be there. So it was really cold of that boss at the time to say to that person, like, "Oh, well, your spouse's parents, uh, loss of life really is inconvenient for me." And I've never met. We've talked a little bit about this too, but I've yet to meet somebody who has not at some point in time worked for a boss that made their life harder than it needed to be. So it's the whole purpose of Hesian and the whole purpose of organizational psychology. My purpose with organizational psychology is to facilitate a happy work environment for people. And that actually translates to more dollars for those businesses as well. That's like a side benefit for them. For me, it's I get to see people happy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I like that you say that it translates into more dollars because, as you and I have spoken in the past, a lot of people don't leave companies, they leave leadership. And somebody who doesn't have a heart to understand a passing of somebody's family is just incredibly selfish from that standpoint. And yeah, I think anyone listening on this call has definitely worked for somebody that has been a thorn in their side, to be PC. But I completely agree with you. From the standpoint of blending academic training with real world practice, how do the two perspectives work together in your consulting? And I love just to track back that you say, how you approach and your way of organizational psychology, because that's what makes you completely unique.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so org psych as an umbrella covers a lot of different things, and my focus on it is leadership specific. So, I guess can you repeat the question again? What?
Yeah, totally. It's how do you blend academic training with real world practice, which you talk a lot about, but it's in essence is how do these two perspectives work together within the consulting that you do?
So, all right. So, blending real world training and the academic success is with that 25 years of experience comes uh just I don't want to use the word experience again, but it comes with the stories that you can apply and show to people of why things actually help. From an academic perspective, I'll take a step back. In the like the research world, there's something that people refer to as the research practitioner gap. Right, there are researchers that look at these things, and then you've got practitioners who kind of do this. So researchers over here will often research something and even create findings that the practitioners are kind of like, thanks, but that doesn't really help me at all. Like you just did a study on X, Y, and Z, but I'm kind of working on A, B, and C over here. As somebody who actually has that experience in the workforce and not just with one organization, but with going around and working with different ones across the US, I'm able to kind of bridge that gap between the two, because most people, in my experience, usually fit into one of two categories, right? You've got researchers and they kind of do their research thing, and it's an academic world. And then you've got the practitioners that are kind of taking that research and doing things with it. But not often do people come from both worlds. And so I like to be able to read and understand that research, to apply it to what I do with Hesian. So everything that I do is an evidence-based, research-based approach to things. So although I have experience, I don't just fall back on my personal experiences and my anecdotes and, well, because I worked for a great boss, everybody must have a great boss, or because I got to go home early on Friday, whatever. Then I don't apply those experiences to you. Instead, I look at what the research says, what people are doing, working from home, for example. How is that applying to other businesses? And I'll take that research that's out there and use it with the working with the clients.
Yeah, and it's almost like what they say, working at a company can almost be one of the best MBAs that you get versus going into MBA. And obviously there's a ton of school of thought that will argue, but I do agree, when you have the background that you have and then the education that you have is a nice marriage, in the sense of you've been in those situations, you've been in that hot seat, and you know the practicum from the educational portion of it. To then meld the two, I think, is super important, because if somebody just goes and studies it without having the experience, now granted, they may graduate, get into the experience, and then start to fine tune and tweak. You're almost that leg up by having these 25 years and then marrying that with the educational component and then really making it your own, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's thank you. You said it much better than me. Yeah, I agree. That's kind of where I'm coming from with it. It's I've got the education, and to me the education kind of supplemented all the experience. And part of it was I wanted to know, like, why am I experiencing things? Why are my friends experiencing these things? How come when I went out to Minnesota, this particular organization was having all of these transparency issues within their organization, right? It's not just how come A isn't talking to B? Like, why? Why aren't they talking? What's the underlying reason behind this? And what can research show to help them? Where we can go, hey, there was a lot of studies kind of done on this topic. Where, look, it's not just me making up stuff off the top of my head, which a lot of people tend to do in a lot of organizations, right? It's going, there are things that can actually help you. They've helped other people. They've helped them this way. And if we implement these steps, they're going to be able to help you too. You're going to be happier. Your team's going to be happier. And like I said, that's what makes me happy personally. But then what's going to make you happy is your bottom line, your budget is going to be happier as well.
Absolutely. Let's pivot a little and talk about leadership in today's context. We know a lot of things are shifting and moving, and it will, in a sense, be interesting just to see how AI plays a role into that. And we can table that and get into that a little later. But what do you see as the biggest leadership challenges organizations face today from that standpoint, from a 5,000 foot view?
From you know from a 5,000 foot view, I think it's a little bit of authenticity. A lot of the people that I'm running into ask questions about how they are supposed to show up, and it might just be all. If I had to pick one word, it might be authenticity. How they're supposed to show up at work. That's one of the frequently asked questions that I get. Actually, is like, I feel this way at home, but how am I supposed to show up at work when I'm not an extrovert, for example? So introversion versus extroversion is something that kind of comes up a lot, right? So people feel, or I've labeled it more like there are a lot of false dichotomies out there, right? Like, how can I be nice and be a leader at the same time? That's not a dichotomy. You can be both. Like, you don't have to pick one or the other there. But there's a lot of false information out there that people think, like, well, you have to be strict, you have to be mean, you got to be tough. So all that kind of, if I had to maybe just off the top of my head put this under one umbrella, I would call it authenticity, where people kind of struggle with how they're supposed to show up at work as a leader.
You bring up a good point in terms of what you just said. How can I be a leader and be nice at the same time? Where do you think that actually stems from? Where do you think that's come from,
I
to
don't
be
know.
this type of a person just because you're a leader?
I don't know. I would have to do some digging on that. I mean, I know historically we have a lot of stereotypes that, and you can be anywhere from movies to television shows to, a sort of patriarchal, historical
Hmm.
perspective where there's, you have to show up as somebody that's strong, right? You have to have a strong leader. And again, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here. I probably will do some more research on this after we get off. But yeah, people, maybe people look to that, they've seen that before, and it's a stereotype
Hmm.
that they feel like they have to
Yeah, I think
fulfill.
it ultimately stems from maybe culture, stereotype, and it would be interesting to note, how it varies in the differentiation across countries, in terms of how their leaders operate from the U.S. to, I don't know, to China, to Australia, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's in the age old of, anywhere from the 80s down, that men were also supposed to be strong and not have those type of
Right.
emotions, but then anywhere from the 90s up, that shift has started to change. So maybe it is that cultural realm and shift.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah. If I had to give one guess, that would probably be it. At least for the U.S. here, and yeah, there's those people. There are a lot of people that are still kind of holding on to that. Well, I've got to show
Mhm.
up tough,
Mhm.
and a lot of people mistakenly assume that they shouldn't show emotions at
Yeah,
work.
totally. I've actually heard people say that to me. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
like, oh, this is my career. This is in the situation that I can't get too soft. I can't get too emotional. Like he was talking to me about something that had happened between him and his wife, and she's a very sensitive person, and I think he had reached, a point where he was just madly in love with her, and it made him softer. But then it made him softer at work, and it wasn't good for his outcome and his return on investment, which was so wild for me to listen to.
Hmm.
Um, from your perspective, how do emerging leaders differ from senior leaders in what they need most?
Emerging leaders, what they really need most is direction, and uh, whoever is mentoring them, helping them, guiding them, they need to set that direction for those emerging leaders, because that's actually probably one of the most common questions is, I'm a new leader, what the heck do I
Yeah.
do? And most often the response is something along the lines of, well, sit back for a second and observe, get to know your team, find out who they are, find out what their goals are, and how you can help them reach those goals, right? And a seasoned leader doesn't need that direction. They know where they're going. In fact, they're, especially if they're, the higher up they are, they're most likely setting direction for their team.
Do you think it's innate in someone's personality, as you're saying, like a seasoned leader? Do you think somebody just knows how to become a leader and they're kind of born with it? Or do you think somebody really has to step in to learn the roles, or is it a mix of both?
I think little column A, little column B, but I would definitely describe leadership as a skill set that can be improved. In fact, if you ever want to take that leadership path, it's something that you need to always continually improve on. Always try and better yourself, better the people around you. Because I mean, I've been doing it for actually over 25 years at this point, and I still, I mean, I'll show you this. I've got this little thing on my desk here. It's a little I am still
Yeah, I
learning
love that.
quote
A little
from
plaque.
Michelangelo. I think the Latin, yeah, I think the Latin phrase was ancora imparo, which is basically, I'm still learning, right? And I've always tried to keep that philosophy. I'm never going to go, well,
I'm done.
I'm done. I've made it to the
Yeah.
summit, and I'm perfect now. I'm the
Yeah.
perfect leader, right? There's so much to learn and grow from, and so yeah, that's how I would kind of
I
frame
like
that.
that. We're continuously evolving, and approaches that you take now aren't going to be approaches that you might take in a year from now. And I think every leader needs to acknowledge that. Like the leader that you were when you stepped into your position may not be the leader that you are 6 months, a year, 2 years from that.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. It's important to continue that
Yeah.
growth mindset.
Segueing in, or prior to segueing in to talk about your approach at Fusion, How do you help organizations measure that leadership impact beyond revenue or efficiency metrics?
So, a couple of ways that I do that. One is with some personality inventories, and that kind of helps with more of like an overall teamwork. But I also do a culture assessment with the organizations that I work with, and that really helps me take a really good deep dive into what's going on in their culture, right? And it could be things like we'll measure transparency, we'll measure uh, psychological safety, right? And we'll measure people's abilities to, if they think that there's accountability within the organization, and those scores give me a really good idea of where they're coming from, and I can do it on all levels. So instead of, I mean, you can take whatever, in a thousand person organization, right? We can measure the entire organization. We can measure just the C-suite, or just this leadership team, or just the IT department, right? And take all those kind of different measurements and see where are our gaps, where are our strengths, and how can we improve them all, right? That's the so I'll look at that, and, like, I had a recent client that was very, very low on uh, accountability. And after discuss, so we get these scores back, and I discuss it with a lot of the employees. Now, the senior management C-suite, they were like, "Hey, give us this assessment. We're good. We're ready for this. We've
Oof.
got this, easy peasy." And they got a really, really, really low score on accountability. Um,
And this was you
and then
surveying the whole company, right? And you do this through surveys,
yes,
just to clarify. Okay.
yes. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I call it an assessment
Yep.
survey, but yeah, it's a psychological assessment. It's built on over 40 years of psychology and research. That it's not just Pete Duche coming up with, I got an idea, I'm going to ask some
Yeah.
questions, right? It's built on a lot of psychology and a lot of research, so that we know it's a valid and reliable
Yeah.
tool to use to measure the health of an
Yeah. No, thanks
organization.
for that
So,
clarification.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's important to me people know that what I do is, like I said, it's that valid and reliable piece where we're not just kind of making stuff up. That goes back to what I was mentioning about the research based approach with Hesian. Um, so yeah, that tool, so that organization, they were very low on accountability, right? And you speak with the people, and they're like, yeah, Sasha gets to go home early because they like her, but not me, sort of thing. And she gets to run around, and she doesn't have to go to the office, but I do. And so there's a lot of things that we were able to work with. Luckily, the leadership, though they were confident in their ability to score highly, they were also really open to going, all right, hey, let's fix this. This is great. I had no idea my team felt this way, so let's fix this. This is why we hired you.
No, that's great. That's a really good explanation. And so then, to your point, what do you think is the difference between executive coaching and leadership coaching?
Executive coaching is really built more for that C-suite
Okay.
approach, and leadership coaching can be for anybody at any point in time. You don't have to be a boss to be a leader.
Okay. Um, and in that sense, anybody can get the executive coaching, no matter. So let's take it a step back from when we were talking about, can does everybody have that sort of, are they primed to be a leader naturally, or do they have to do a lot of work? Would you then say executive coaching could be for somebody who wants to be primed into that leadership role, and then leadership consulting is really what you would take once you step into that role to just fine tune and tweak?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so executive coaching, I would call it more on an individual
Okay.
level, right, and more geared toward. It doesn't have to be C-suite specifically, but that's kind of generally more mid range to higher up, is generally more who seek that
Got
executive
it.
type
Okay.
coaching. And leadership coaching, it can be organization wide. It's geared toward teams, right? Where you can go like, hey, can we get leadership coaching for our entire all of our IT
Yes.
managers, right?
So, when bringing in organizational psychology, how does that lens shape the way you approach client challenges?
So what's really important for me with organizational psychology is there are ethical standards that have to be met that I hold myself to. And part of that is coming in with a very neutral approach, right? So, sure, I've got 25 years of experience, but that's not going to influence how I'm going to think about you. I'm not going to make assumptions about when I come in. So, the first thing that I like to do is go with some instruments, right? Some surveys or assessments that go back to that valid and reliable piece, where it's kind of more like, what does the data
Yeah.
show us here? Not what does Pete Duche think? What is Pete going to assume or just kind of uh, make up as he goes along, which I've unfortunately seen some people do, right? But it's like, let's look at data and how can we take this data and
Hmm.
improve things, right? So that's kind of that initial
From
approach.
the assessments and the tools, would you say, and thank you for saying that, because I think you're right. There are a lot of people that have that cookie cutter template, go in with, okay, they're in this industry, they're in that industry, they have X people in their C-suite, and they kind of put them in a box, right? Whereby you go in completely, um, what I'd like to say, as a blank canvas, to then really
Mhm.
uncover and discover who they are as a company. But you did mention that you have the tools in place, the assessments, a variety of different tools. How do you work with those or pull from them from a lever within this toolbox of yours based on case scenarios of each company? Because I assume that each company differs from each other, so they're not necessarily always going to need the templatized version of all of these different tools and assessments, but it's, you really marry the issue and the problem to the tools that you have to really help them grow and thrive.
Yeah, so the short answer is a lot of it depends on what the client wants, but there's also a little bit of like, well, if you're going to do that, then I really strongly suggest we take these steps. Going back a little bit, part of my reason for that again is based on experience, where I have sat through countless, I mean, literally countless lectures from people coming in and giving a leadership talk that either didn't apply to me or they had no clue what they were talking about. I mean, I sat through one where a person was, I mean, basically concluded by saying that we should go to Chinatown in New York City and get a particular uh, sleep mask. It was the oddest thing. I'm like, this is not
This is for
helping at
leadership
all.
coaching? I'm
Yeah,
confused.
it was. Yeah, it was. No, yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Exactly. So yeah, it was really just I've sat through a lot of just like people have that cookie cutter, that template that they use, right? Where they
Cookie
go in and they
cutter
go
or
like,
kooky cutter?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well done. That was
Yeah.
very punny. Um, or as a police officer, should I say that you should be in a
Yeah.
penitentiary? Um, so the so right, so the different assessments for different things, right? I love the personality assessment that I use because it is backed by science. It's not just just um, something that a free survey
Yeah.
online that you can just anybody can
Mhm.
manipulate. But because that really helps with teamwork, right? If I'm extremely introverted and you're extremely extroverted, it's good for us to know that
Yeah.
about each other. If I'm like really love incorporating humor in the workplace, but you don't, you might take that as I don't take things seriously or I don't take work seriously. But that's not true. I take work very seriously. I also just like to joke around, right? And it's good for me to know that about you. I might think like, it's her problem. Why can't she smile?
Mhm.
Right. And it's because you don't want to incorporate humor at work. So there's a lot of ways we can kind of dig into those things. So that's why I really enjoy kind of getting into personality and personality profiles and there's something called the Big Five personalities or Ocean. If anybody kind of
Mhm.
wants to
Mhm.
look that up, that's the basis for all personality research. But the but I mean, another example is I can't remember if we discussed this at all or not in the past, but emotional intelligence, right? I mean, that's something that leaders should have. They want to be effective
Yeah.
leaders, right? So one of the measurement tools that I use is something called the Mesquite, the Myers-Solovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test, and that measures one's ability to perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions, right? And from there, it kind of goes down into another subset, right? There are different branches, right? Managing emotions, for example, managing emotions in yourself, managing emotions in other people. So there are ways to actually measure these things and see where we lie on a scale compared to other
Yeah.
people and how we can improve upon that.
I think that's really fascinating because as you're talking through it, I'm just seeing all of these different ways in which you can test and really pull out so many different layers. I mean, you almost think of, I'm almost like envisioning the business as an onion where there's so many different layers and it's not just departments and it's not the personalities that are in there. I mean, there's so much happening, right? On a day-to-day basis, and it's not just the goal of getting the work done, but it's emotional feelings, like how maybe it's things that are happening externally, like on the outside, that people are bringing into the inside. What is the state of our world, politics, so on and so forth, and how does that support or unsupport how we reach our goals as a business? I mean, yeah, I hadn't even thought about all the different layers within an organization, and when you really peel back, it's a lot.
There
Yeah.
is a lot, and now with remote work coming in to being a much bigger player than it was years ago, I mean that adds a whole new
Yeah.
level to leadership. And how do you lead people who are working in remote teams? Some of which are close in proximity, some are literally scattered
Yeah.
across the
Yeah.
world.
I mean, it's not just within the United States. It's to your point, somebody could be in India, somebody could be in Eastern Europe or wherever it is. But it does really put an interesting dynamic the more that sort of builds, and how does a leader, it's funny because the leader has a job to get the company to X, but then they also have a job to really pull and push their team to get to X. So they actually are running in two lanes, not just one lane,
Hmm.
as it looks to appear like, yeah, I just stepped into this role and we're gonna reach these goals. But it's the psychology of how you get your team to get to those goals and then really ultimately reaching those goals at the end of the day. So my mind is just
Right.
exploding
And
at
so
so many different miles an
yeah,
hour right now. Because
yeah, no,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
great. I love it. I love seeing the
yeah,
light bulbs go off too, right? So now we're talking about
yes,
motivation, right? And how do we motivate a team? How do we set that direction for a team? What does a team look like? How should it be organized? Is there research on how big a
yep,
team should
yep,
be? By the way,
yep,
there is. Um, and I mean that's one of my favorite statistics is a lot of people create teams that are too
yes.
big. Most teams research shows that, again, generally speaking, there's an asterisk to
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
that we
of
say,
course.
and organizational psychologists, one of our biggest responses to almost all questions is it depends. But with that, the ideal team size is 4.6 people. With research from Richard Hackman, who is a psychologist out of Harvard. And so, because if you have a team that's too big, it can actually start to weigh itself down and start grind in the process and actually get in its own way, right? And if you have it too small, then and you also can have a groupthink with a team that's too big, right? And if you have it too small, you might not be able to accomplish your goals as efficiently. So that's where that 4.6 people
Yeah.
comes in. Like I said, there's always going to be exceptions to that
Yeah.
general rule, but that's what the
Okay, so I,
research
I
came up.
wanna I wanna unpack that a little bit because when we think of enterprise, you potentially can have somebody that, and just so that it's understood, right? You have the CEO and there's like hundreds of people in this company. But when you say 4.6, then you're saying at the top of that 4.6 there needs to be a leader, and then it can sort of, that's what you mean, correct? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I've definitely been in
Yep.
a team that's been larger than 4.6, and yes, things do go array at a multitude. So,
They
yeah.
do. I mean, I would bet money that you have listeners right now that have sat in teams that with way larger than 4.6
Yeah.
people. Sorry, I'm giggling at the point 0.6 people here, right? Where you sat in a meeting for an hour or two, or maybe three sometimes, and either nothing gets done because you have some people that like to talk
Yep.
more than others, or the meeting wasn't prepared properly, and you're sitting there like going, "We should have brainstormed this and come to this meeting with answers," but instead Pete's been talking for 45 minutes about something that's not even really on topic here, right? And the list kind of goes on. From there, with bigger teams, you also have these concepts called like diffusion of responsibility and social loafing, where you're going to, either assume that somebody else is going to take care of something for you, or you're like, well, we're in a big team, so Sasha's got that handled. I don't have to worry about my role right now.
So
that's where organizational psychology really comes and can help shed some light on teamwork.
You talk a little bit about co-creation with clients. Can you share a story of how that played out in practice?
Yeah. Are you talking about just kind of from like the initial what they're...
Because I can almost think that and this was going to be my follow-up question, because there's numerous amounts of layers as it relates to organizational psychology, right? So you could come in and give them the big picture just based on the assessments, right? Could they then come back to you and say, you know what, Pete, I want to work on this first. But then you're going to have to come back and say, we can work on this first, but this needs to go hand in hand. Otherwise, it's not going to support the mission of getting to blah, blah, blah. Because they've obviously come to you with a goal. And while you can slice and dice bits of what comes back from some of the assessments, some need to work hand in hand versus in complete silo.
Yeah. So to that point, right? I can kind of go back a little bit to that one organization that was having issues with accountability, and one of the ways one of the things that we looked at with that was transparency, and those two can kind of complement a little bit with each other, right? If you're going to have a little bit more transparency, because part of what they were doing was there was a perception of a lack of accountability because some of the leaders were not being transparent with why some of the employees were doing what they were doing. So we worked on psychological safety to bring up the transparency, because there was a feeling of, well, I'm not really sure if I can share some of this, et cetera, which then was able to help with the accountability. So it turns out the organization wasn't doing anything wrong. Right? They weren't bad people or anything like that. They weren't doing anything underhanded. It wasn't like they were, really giving special treatment to somebody. But one person, I'll dive into a little bit deeper. One person's role was to actually, part of their job description, they were hired to actually leave the office and go take care of X, Y, and Z, right? But some other people in the office literally did not know that, right? And so they were like, how come Sasha gets to leave, right? And so leadership was kind of like, stay in your lane, right? And so we kind of just talked more about what it means to be able to kind of speak up, respectfully and peacefully, and to have respectful conversations with each other, psychological safety, where you're able to, without fear of repercussion, right? And we're able to improve that transparency, where we're going, oh yeah, Shasta actually she's working,
like that's part of
there.
Her role.
She's doing this. It's part of her role, right? Part of her job description, and that is in turn, improve the accountability score.
I mean,
help a little bit and make sense.
Down and boil down to, I guess, transparency and communication of, I mean, not that, like, for me, it would be like, is it really important for me to know what every Tom, Dick, and Harry does? Because, I mean, let's face it, everybody that works in a job that goes and shows up 9 to 5, like, they're nosy, right? And they're watching other people just as they're doing their own job. So the nosiness is going to create gossip. The gossip is going to create, falsified information, and that information is going to get passed along. And then all of a sudden, this person is being thrown to a dartboard, and darts are being thrown at them, and they have no idea why.
Right. So ultimately, the goal is to never get it past that step one there, or even take that very first step that you mentioned there. Right. You want to work on that piece where everybody actually isn't worried about what the heck is Sasha doing today. It's not like that at all, right? I'm Pete, and I'm going to work, and I'm going to do my thing, and I know what Sasha and I are a team, and she's taking care of her business right there, right? And so, yeah, communication is a huge piece of it, but you can have improper communication. You can have bad communication, and I don't mean bad communication as in lack of. I mean bad communication as in, like, instead of me saying to you, "Hey, Sasha, here's why we're doing what we're doing," it can be like, you know, hey, mind yourself, worry about yourself. It's not your job to think about other things. And I don't want to hear this coming from
Yeah.
you again. Right. I mean, that's communication. But if I'm sitting there telling you to like shut your
Yeah.
mouth, like you're gonna be like, what the
Yeah.
heck? What, like, why is that? I actually had somebody come to me when I was a lieutenant over an investigation team, and we investigated everything from from shopliftings to homicides and everything in between. And one of the detectives, I was like I said, I was a lieutenant, so it's kind of like two ranks up from a detective. Stopped by my office, and he was like, "Hey, LT, I got a quick question." And I was like, "Yeah, buddy, what's up?" And he stopped himself and he said, "You know what? You're a lieutenant. You don't have to answer to me or my questions." And so, I mean, obviously, I know you know the answer is yes, I do, right? Of course, I
Mm-hmm.
do. Just because I outrank somebody doesn't mean that I don't owe them answers. But that was kind of the mindset that had been instilled in him. That how dare he ask me a
Mm-hmm.
question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be that way
I've seen
at
that.
all. So just be able to, right?
Yeah.
But it shouldn't
Yeah.
be that way. So there are ways that we can go into organizations and look and go, like leaders might not even know that's happening in
Oh
their
no, they
organization,
they
right?
don't. They
Somebody
don't
might,
at all.
yeah,
I had an instance where I was at a large media company and we had hired a new graphic designer, and we would have meetings about the meeting that we just had with the leader to uncover what she meant. Well, why weren't we asking her to clarify herself? So the one graphic designer was like, I'm just going to waltz right in there and I'm going to ask her. And everyone was like, good luck with that. And when she got in there, she was like, oh, I just wanted to clarify this point. And she was like, thank God that you came in here and did that. She's like, because nobody does that. So they don't know,
nice, right?
which is
Yep.
ridiculous. It's like, why do we, that's also, I think, a cultural thing that all of a sudden when somebody is a leader, it's thought to almost be as if they are beyond our reach when it shouldn't be that case
Mhm.
at all.
Right, right, yeah, and so when we're looking at that sort of thing, and we're kind of talking about the psychology of ambivalent relationships, right? And it's that ambivalency is going to influence and impact how our
Yeah.
interactions play out. And sometimes it's because we don't know if we're going to get our, sometimes it's because our leaders are like, I don't know if I'm getting nice Pete or
Yeah.
mean Pete today. I don't know if I can ask him this question because sometimes he's really nice to me and sometimes he
Yeah.
snaps at me for
Yeah.
no reason. Right. So there are a lot of things at play here that really can show us how we can make those work
Yeah.
interactions better.
In your experience, why do cultural shifts fail or succeed during change?
Yeah, change is
Hmm.
huge, right? And change management is occurring with a lot of companies
I
right
mean,
now.
there's companies that do
And
change management that aren't
yeah,
in organizational psychology.
yeah, that's always interested me. I mean, I prefer the organizational psychology piece to it because, like I said, that's we do what we do is more grounded in research with change management. But but anyhow, failures occur. A lot of it is
Hmm.
communication, right? And sometimes it's really simple. One of my clients were actually moving locations, smaller ish client, and they,
Like office locations, you mean?
oh
Hmm.
yeah, sorry,
Hmm.
office locations, right? And it wasn't too far. It was probably about a half hour move, and everybody had kind of agreed to help move. By the way, I was brought in after this, um, and there was during the move. So mostly everybody helped with like loading the truck, and they have about 30 people in the organization, and unloading the truck. But at the day of the move, leadership decided, hey everybody, um, lunch is on us. Go, here's X dollars. Enjoy. Well, that only went over well with some of the people because others said, "Well, how come you didn't order lunch and have it delivered to us?" And then others said, "Well, how come Sasha and Pete went off together in a group? Like, they're a special clique right now, and they eat together, but we weren't invited to go out to lunch." So you had different people going, "Why wasn't lunch ordered for us? How come we all didn't go out as a group together? How come only some people
Ooh.
went out to group together? Did you guys not plan this?" Right? And so and that's just I mean, I'll say the word microcosm, but of what can go on. That's just
Yeah.
lunch,
Yeah.
right? So if you're talking about change and change initiative for an organization, if it's going to be everything from organizational structure to implementation of new policies, right? Depending on the size of organization and how many people you're going to be dealing with. Sorry, you probably can't hear, but I've got a
Yeah, that's
dog
okay.
barking in the background now,
It's live.
complimenting. Right. But when you're dealing with that change management, right? It's like what a lot of companies fail to do is that communication piece, and sometimes it can be as simple as, "Hey, everybody, this is what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing. This is our
Mm-hmm.
plan," right? But people, they withhold that information. Or like, oh, I'm not going to tell them what I'm doing, or they think if I say this ahead of time and I don't make it true, then it's going to upset them. They're going to think that I was lying about it, right? So there's all sorts of like people play. Sometimes we're victims of our own ambition. We play tricks on ourselves, going like, oh, I'm going to outsmart myself and my team because I won't do this or I will do that, and it ends up backfiring on them. When there are little things that we can do from a psychology standpoint that will help with transition. I mean, quick example,
Yeah,
pilot
yeah,
program, right? Like, hey, let's do it with a small portion first and see how
yeah,
that works and
yeah.
take it from there.
So what do you think is the most common mistake? Is it communication within that change management?
I mean, if I had to
Yeah.
blanket everything, it would be communication, like in that everything that goes with communication, how things are
Yeah. I mean,
communicated,
I think all
and planning and
I think all
communication.
issues in life is the root cause of communication.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
piece. It really is.
Yeah. But also trust seems to be at the core of high performing teams as well. So, I mean, how do you help leaders build that? I mean, how do you help leaders communicate better? But then how do we really help build trust? What do you suggest for that?
Yeah, so trust and building trust, a lot of that falls back on that psychological safety piece that we were talking about earlier, right? At what point in time are you going to learn to trust me? How are you going to learn to trust me? And what can I do to show you that you can trust me, right? Because it's that kind of falls back on the show don't tell sort of
Mhm.
thing. And it's a great question. And so part of it, the answer is it depends. But a lot of it just falls back through my actions, and when we are going to work on something together, am I going to follow through with the things that I told you I was going to follow through on? Are Am I going to help you the way I should be helping you? Am I going to take credit for something that you did? Right, I'm your boss, you do something good, and I walk into my boss's room and say, hey, look what I did. Which, I'm sure you've heard stories or maybe even have experienced that yourself at some point in time. uh, you know, and so there's just a ton of different ways that trust can be built up and diminished through
Yeah,
actions.
yeah.
And like I need to dig deeper into that. I would need to see who I'm working
Mhm.
with, what they're doing, how they interact, and also speak with. I mean, I might if you were hiring me, sure, I'd want to talk with you and see what you're doing, but I also want to see who's reporting to you. And I got to
Yeah,
talk with
yeah.
them and find out what
I
their
mean,
opinion
on that
is.
note, do you then think that you have like one chance? Like what if a leader is sitting at the top and a lot of people don't trust them? Do you think that that can be flipped, or you think it's a done deal?
It can be flipped, but it depends on the
Mhm.
person and it depends on amount of time that they spent ruining
Yeah.
trust, and then amount of time that they spend
Yeah.
trying to build it back. I have seen people
Mm,
flip around.
that's good to
I've
know.
also seen people flip back around,
Ooh.
go back and betray that trust
Okay,
again.
that's good. Yeah.
So,
Um,
well,
both
both
ways.
ways. So I saw somebody down here, and then they regained trust, and everybody's like, "Hey, you're great," and they're like, and then for whatever reason, and this wasn't one of
Yeah.
my clients, but the for whatever reason that
Down
person went,
again.
you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna hammer you.
Ooh, that's terrible. Ugh. If you had a company that just wanted one quick win, what would you suggest? So I think this goes back to like our original conversation when you go through, and maybe you'll tell me, Sasha, that it just can't work that way, or maybe it can, but I think you're gonna answer me, you're gonna say it depends.
I'll just say it
Yeah,
depends right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean,
Um, yeah, it depends on the company, right? And what they're doing and what they are, and where they are and where they
yeah.
stand, right? Because I've dealt with some that are like, boy, we've got a lot of areas to pick from where we're going to improve. Let's just go with this one. And, this is probably the most pressing. And I've dealt with others that are like, I'm like really impressed and happy. Like, I almost want to say like, well, you guys don't really need me, but if you want me, this is, maybe something we can kind of work on just
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. I definitely see that because there's a multitude of layers now as we've unpacked. So, Pete, this has been so insightful and so informative, and it's helped me really go back. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing in terms of all of the previous jobs that I had internally, and kind of unpeel those layers like, ooh, this could have been done better, that could have been done better. And I think it's interesting because as an entrepreneur, and even for yourself as a solo entrepreneur, when you build your team, uh, it's the challenge of building your product and service and growing it in market, as well as once you onboard people, it's that two-lane streak as we talked about, and really getting your team energized and focused to get you to that end lane, right? Because the psychology of going and working for an enterprise or working for a startup is completely different. So yeah,
Absolutely.
this has been really great. But before we let you go, I like to do my fireside round, which is one word, one myth, one habit. So whatever comes to mind, just go ahead and answer. Don't think too much about it.
Okay. So you just want me to come up with
No,
a
I'm going to
word.
ask you a question.
And,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Okay. All right.
So
All right.
in one word, if you had to describe leadership in just one word, what would it be?
Ooh, just one word, but don't think about it much. I would say
Hmm.
catalyst.
I want to unpack that, and I never usually do, but unpack that because I think that there's so many layers to organizational psychology. I want to make sure we really get what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, catalyst, obviously it, it can, it can mean different things to different people, right? And depending on context, it
Yeah.
depends, right? But you can have transformation without taking over. Catalyst kind of to me also implies like science-backed action
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
orientation, um, bridging intention with impact, and I think catalyst can also resonate across all audiences, right? So you can be accessible, and I guess just kind of sparking
Mm-hmm,
change without being
mm-hmm.
consumed. That kind of also falls back on an
Yeah,
implication of
I like that.
catalyst.
One myth. What's one myth about leadership you'd love to debunk for good?
Oh my goodness. Actually, there are so many. Which one do I get to
Yeah.
pick from? Um, I guess I'd probably the one, and I hope one of your listeners. I hope this resonates with at least one person. If this helps one person, I hope I've done my job. And that is that leaders need to be
Mm,
extroverts. That's not true. You can be an
mm.
introverted leader.
Interesting. What's one habit every leader should build into their daily practice?
Gosh, I'll I'll uh, I'll probably go. This is something that I've somewhat recently started, not recently, but so far it's proven really helpful to me. Are you familiar with Zettelkasten's
No,
by
no,
any
it sounds
chance?
German.
It's a second
Okay.
brain. So there are different programs out there, right? And basically you can take information that you have. I use a lot of like peer reviewed research and journal articles, and you can program them into this Zettelkasten. I use a program called Obsidian, and happy to show it to you later if you'd
Mm-hmm.
like to see it. And it can you basically can type keywords and tag words, right? So if you want to go back in there and go like, oh man, what was my thing on motivation, right? Instead of just having like file folders and maybe everybody uses like some filing system, whether it's on Google Docs or OneDrive or whatever, right? With a Zettelkasten, you can type in that one keyword that you have. Like I said, I'll use motivation, for example, and it can pull up every article, or it doesn't have to be articles, right? It can be web pages, it can be books that you've kind of
Mm-hmm.
summarized or whatever on motivation that you've tagged with the word motivation, and bring them all up into one specific place. So it's kind of like having a second brain,
Mm.
and engaging in that and helping keeping that second brain
Mm.
organized is, I think, a really good
I'm gonna
leadership
look
tactic.
that up. Zettelkasten? I'm telling you,
Yes,
it sounds German. If I said it in a German accent, it would kind of.
it is
Oh,
German.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Pete, this has been such a pleasure.
And
Honestly, it's been so great, and thank you for
oh, it's been
all
great.
the insights, all the information, and really, diving deep into honestly what makes a good leader, and what you can do to become a good leader. For those of you listening, I mean, even if you're a solo entrepreneur or if you're on the track to get to that leadership role in your company.
Thank you for having me.